Hi, Clary.
There, now I'm unmuted. Hi.
You are. Hi.
I didn't realize I was muted. I just read Linda Rosenthal's letter on the bull moose dog run that you just sent around.
Yeah.
You know, it's supportive. It says this pea gravel, the rice gravel instead of pea gravel is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a chance to glance at it after I sent it around, but I was juggling a few things. We are live streaming, by the way.
Okay.
So, no Jeffrey Toobins.
Ken, you have a new background, or is that your real background?
That's my real background. I got a new camera, so I can.
Never seen that one. I see you with those beautiful, whatever you call those backdrops.
Well, if you prefer, I can switch to that.
Well, it's up to you.
I think
most enviable.
Seems to be an inside view of the Coghlan home.
Right.
Yes.
Let's see who else we get. It is 6:27. So.
Yeah.
Ken, did you get any response today from Margaret about?
No,
yeah.
I didn't. I wasn't sure whether she's still on vacation.
I think not. I mean, we had some reason a couple weeks ago to think she was back about a week and a half ago, maybe, and John back last week, but I'm not sure. But at least you were not injured, which is good.
Yeah.
Is that a change? Was that sign not there before?
I don't remember it, and I've gone by there a number of times. I would have stopped and moved it myself, but I was with somebody who was intent on forging ahead, and I couldn't stop.
Yeah, that's a dangerous thing because the folks coming around the curve often overshoot the divided line.
Yeah, yeah.
The southbound folks.
Right.
Plus, hasn't it about been as long as they said that project was going to be with that particular detour? It's been a while.
Maybe twice as long. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Well,
they
that's
also said
for any project.
they said they were going to put signage for southbound cyclists, alerting people about it, and they haven't done that.
Let's see, we've lost Cindy, although we haven't lost her in our lives, just to our committee.
To change teams, yeah.
Change teams, right? We're kind of all in some way the same team. So we're looking for Doug, Natasha, and Elizabeth as
Right.
committee members. And perhaps Barbara will join us and maybe some other board members. We'll see.
I'm going to start the webinar, which means that the attendees, and we start recording. Okay.
Let's
And let's see who the attendees are. Right now it's Barbara Adler, as you predicted.
Oh,
Excellent.
do you want to make her a participant? I'm happy.
I sure will.
Panelist, rather. Barbara,
Hi, everyone.
you've become a panelist.
Thank you. I see that.
And Jeff Martin is with us. And let's see, attendees is now Ira Gershenhun and Polly Spain. How do we do, well, it's up to you, Mark, how you do panelist versus attendee for other board members.
Unless we're running up against the limit, we would almost always promote fellow board members.
So have you already promoted Polly? I see you've already promoted Polly. Welcome, Polly.
Yep. Where is Clary?
I'm
There you are.
I'm a participant.
You're now a co-host.
Oh. Hey, hi, Jeff. We've got Jeff Martin, the guy that runs Riverside Park.
Yeah, guys, how you doing?
That's
Hey,
fun.
good to see you.
Am I late?
No, exact.
Okay.
Although as committee members, we're still looking for Doug, Natasha, and Elizabeth. Oh, we got Elizabeth.
And you got Natasha.
We got Natasha. So let's start, I guess. And is Ben, is Matt Genrich with us yet? I don't think so.
I sent him the link, but I don't see him yet.
Yeah, we got,
It's just 6:31, so.
I see our list of attendees. Okay, let's start. So I'm gonna go. So I'm, for those, and I don't think there's anybody who's with us who doesn't know this, but this is the October meeting of the CB7 Parks and Environment Committee. I'm Clary Newelt, at the moment, the only chair, but sooner or later we'll have another co-chair. We'll have probably a relatively short meeting tonight and relatively few attendees, except for some really welcome, loyal members of the community, because we don't have a new specific agenda item tonight for our action and discussion tonight. We're really mostly talking about our committee. And so the first thing I think is to thank Elizabeth. Elizabeth, we're seeing a picture of you, Elizabeth, not you yourself at the moment, but
I'm on. I just have a very large puppy.
I want to thank Elizabeth, whose last meeting as co-chair was last month, for her collegiality, her knowledge, her everything that she's brought to our committee, where she's remaining as a committee member. And as Elizabeth and I said today, not only is she a true Parkie, but she and I invented the new word. She's a true environment. Am I getting this right? Environmentee as well.
Environmentee.
Both important qualifications for our committee. So thanks, Elizabeth, and we're glad you're staying with us. So
Here.
we really have only two things on the agenda tonight. Oh, but by the way, and I don't think I've done this myself yet. Wait a minute. Where's the chat? Everybody should type your name, everybody who's a committee member or board member, type your name in the chat addressed to all panelists so that you'll be recorded for the minutes in case somehow that otherwise doesn't happen. I'm doing that right now. But as we've learned, or at least I learned recently, if you do anything in the chat and you're a panelist and you want the members of the public, or the otherwise known as the attendees, to see it, you need to change the default on the chat box So it says all panelists and attendees. And that way, anybody who's with us tonight will see whatever you have put in the chat. So we really have two things tonight on our list, but they are basically all about committee business and they somewhat overlap each other. The second item, as we always have, is updates on projects we already have, things we've approved, issues we've discussed, resolutions we've passed. So we'll get to that next. But the first thing is kind of just a brief discussion on what our committee's doing now, thoughts for our committee. And I want to start it out and then hear from other people, of course. The first most important thing tonight is that tomorrow is the steering committee meeting at which the steering committee ranks overall for CB7 our budget priorities, both on the capital side and the expense side. That is an enormous, well, it's a difficult meeting, and it's not going to be any more easy on Zoom. It'll probably be more difficult, as all of our meetings are probably more difficult on Zoom. As has been the case in past years, because of the very large number of capital projects and even expense items that we have in our committee, and because we are lucky enough to be able to get input back and forth with the Parks Department, which happened very, 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 very recently, and the timing issue and all sorts of stuff, we can't within our committee rank our own items to take them to the steering committee tomorrow. So what I had to do, and it was a very, very, as Mark knows, because he had to then deal with the product I sent him, it was a very, very, very big deal to update the district needs statement that we talked about last month to reflect all of the issues and concerns and changes and problems we have from COVID that are still ongoing. And some of them are getting better. We're getting some composting back. We're getting some other stuff back. But the focus of the DNS itself, the text is large, the new material we have is largely the effects of the COVID. We also learned just the end of last week that the Parks Department has handed us some new capital priorities that we didn't realize that we were going to have to deal with. And just to be really brief about that, specifically, 2 comfort stations in Riverside Park South that were always since the beginning in the early 1990s when the plans in general for the park were approved. Comfort station down at 62nd Street that would serve not just recreational and commuting cyclists and others who are going up and down around the park, but would serve a huge multi-sport, multi-purpose playing field that's the central feature of Riverside, of phase 6, the southernmost phase. Was always supposed to have a comfort station. We thought that was in the plans, it was designed, but apparently the developer is left it out of the plans. We don't know yet whether they've been bid, whether they have a contractor, but in any event, that's something we had to put on our list. And we had gradually learned that the other comfort station that's always been essential to comfort stations, New York Parks Department speak for bathrooms, if you don't know. The other comfort station that was also from 1992, essential to the plan for the park, it's up at the Riverside Boulevard level at 66th Street, also was designed but never bid by the Parks Department. That's in phase 5, which we'll talk about later, is maybe this time really about to open, but minus the comfort station. So suddenly the Parks Department told us we got to put those on our lists and try to help them find money. So there have been a number of changes on our list this year, but what I tried to do in ranking them, and I won't say much more about it now, is to take into account the new things that the Parks Department has said are now priorities, is to rank them to the extent possible, largely maintaining the relative ranks that had been our committee's judgment and rankings in prior years, to the extent, which is mostly that they have not already been funded and graduated from our list. And finally, in light of COVID and in light of the use of our parks and primarily Riverside Park that we now see, to try to rank them in a way that takes into account the needs and concerns of the greatest number of park users. So tomorrow, it's really important that all of our members attend the steering committee meeting and help me and Elizabeth advocate for the parks items. Because what happens is, and some of you have been at that meeting in the past, Ken certainly is familiar with it, I think maybe others are too. There's a lot of horse trading that goes on among the chairs of the various committees. There's a lot of back and forth. But to keep us from getting creamed, we need all of you there to advocate for our items. You'll all, of course, exercise your own personal judgment. And it's not to say that any of us would say all of our parks items should come before any other item. We've never said that, and we'd never win with that. But it's important for all of you to be there tomorrow, 6:30. Mark will be the chair. Mark's the chair of that meeting as well as the board. So that's it for now on the DNS and the budget priorities, unless anybody has a question.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Is it possible for us to see the list?
I haven't got it yet, although Mark did his best to take what I sent him and make it a list. It came to me tonight. So Mark, why don't you answer that? How it's going to work for all the committees tomorrow, Mark?
It should be distributed to the full board. We got a lot of this material much later than the deadline we asked for. It's still, in fact, coming in.
Oh,
so,
come on, I met the deadline. Okay, whatever.
You did.
It was a big job. Okay.
And it was a big job, and translating what I got from you, which was helpful, into the format that is useful for that meeting is also a bit of a trick. That was done today. I can send it to the committee right now if that would be useful.
I was just talking about the Parks and Environment item.
That's what I mean. I can't send the whole thing because I don't have the whole thing yet.
Yeah. Mark, in the chat are a couple of things we need to look at. One, Doug asks whether the invite has been sent to the steering committee yet. And I don't know whether the invitation goes out to all board members. It probably should for this meeting.
It goes to the steering committee members, and they have been invited. Anybody else who wants in, I'm glad to add. There's plenty of room.
And Polly Spain says she's in the meeting. Her technology isn't cooperating. She's hopeful she'll solve her problems.
That's actually me on her behalf.
Oh, okay. Oh. And Elizabeth, okay, I got this one. It's good job, Mark, which we all agree with. So at least for now, that's it on the DNS, the budget priorities, and tomorrow's steering committee meeting. There's nothing else, I think, Mark, that's sort of directly relevant to anything we're talking about tonight that's coming up tomorrow. Is that right?
I think so. We will be talking a little bit about meeting management, a couple of different things for full board, and including policing the chat when it gets pretty rough and tumble. There'll be an update from a block association having to do with that super tall tower in the southern part of the district. But the big items will be the expense and the capital budget priorities. Most of the, as you'll see shortly, most of the P&E budget priorities are capital, although there are a few expense ones. I think most of the, and as you saw in my email over the weekend, or maybe it was the end of last week, there are a couple of expense priorities that I'm going to propose outside of any committee because they don't neatly fit within a committee. We don't have a uniform services committee, for example.
No, but I think that the trash pickup one, actually, I worked with you on that, is within sort of our environmental purview in any event.
Yeah, well, I have language for it, but if you like yours better, I'm sure that's fine too.
You may choose between mine and yours. I sent you mine, you can do yours. It doesn't matter.
And then the other is adding back some funding to the police department for overtime, which I feel strongly about as a way to sort of balance out competing concerns. Hey, there's Polly.
She's back, I think.
All right.
Finally.
Okay, we got
Okay.
your audio too,
So the
Pat.
old unplug and restart worked. Excellent. I love it.
Yes, thank you.
All right. That's all I got for right now, Penny, Clark.
Okay, so, I don't think we need to have a very long discussion on our first item, which is, I think it's written generally as committee operations and plans or something. I did want to remember to say one thing that I said only at the end of last month's meeting, which is our thanks to both Matt Genrich, who normally joins our committee meetings, Matt being the manager for DPR of District 7 and everything in our district other than, and in another district as well, other than Riverside and Central Park, and Jeff Martin, who is with us tonight and is with us nearly every month. And both of them, as we conduct our meetings, are frequently very, very helpful and back and forth in dealing with the real world as it exists on any day that we are speaking with them. I think it's part of what they get paid for to join us, so they are paid slightly more than we are for being here, but not a whole lot more.
Imperceptibly. I have a funny feeling.
Yeah, probably.
In fact, we probably shouldn't inquire about the minimum wage because we might be challenging it.
No. So I just wanted to start out on our first more general item by saying that, and Elizabeth and I have worked together on this, tried to continue to do so over the last part of the year, on both two things that overlap. One is trying to increase our committee's environmental activities, focus on environmental issues as from the point of view of CB7. And second, to work on really involving committee members other than the chairs on what we do day to day. A lot of what we do, there's no way to avoid a lot of work for the chairs. That's just how it is. But we've been very successful recently on at least two issues, and we'll see how, and hope they will continue in going in this direction. Both environmental issues where members of our committee have agreed to sort of become our point people on these issues. One is Natasha, who first kind of brought us into focus on this, has been following issues of trash collection, garbage, and I'm not sure, Natasha, whether you're now our compost person as well. That, we started that a few months ago because Natasha expressed an interest, and having somebody who's specifically charged with and has undertaken to kind of follow an issue and perhaps expand or contract the scope of the issue, but at least follow the issue for us has been not only very helpful, but I think an accomplishment we've had in the last few months. Similarly, Ken has recently agreed to follow the helicopter noise issue and danger, I guess, as well. There's Ken. Yeah, right. Look it up. I hadn't even remembered this, but Community Board 7 when was it, Ken? January?
Yes.
Passed a resolution supporting proposed federal legislation that would limit, to be a little bit concise about it, I guess, would limit helicopter noise flying above us, our parks and our neighborhood. It's essentially a federal issue. Efforts to control it through New York City law or even New York State law come up against some legal doctrines about federal preemption and whatever. So what we're now looking at is federal proposed legislation. But my point is not so much the substance of it, is that Ken has agreed to be our point person on that. And that is fully consistent with our having a position that the full board has already taken. So Ken is in a position to not only follow the issue, but to be representing the CB7 consistent with our position. So I'm trying to think what else.
Clary, can I just say something?
Of course.
Thank you for making me in charge of composting and everything sanitation related. I'll take that responsibility if nobody else wants it. It is important to me.
You're not regretting it yet. So.
And I just wanted to say that I attended Mark Levine's town hall from 5 to 6 p.m. today on sanitation, recycling, and composting. And if there's time, I can update the committee on it. There was really nothing earth-shattering about it. It was very educational for me, but I'm happy to share what they said on that meeting.
Do you want to do that right now?
Sure. So Mark Levine hosted this town hall today from 5 to 6 p.m. The title was Sanitation, Recycling, and Composting. And he had people from different agencies and nonprofits on there. Obviously, we're all aware of all the budget cuts, and there's really nothing that they can do about it until the city or the mayor decides to roll those back. And there was actually very little information that they had on the future of certain programs. Like I think in our previous meeting, I talked about e-waste recycling.
Yes.
And I asked that question in the meeting again in today's meeting. And they basically had nothing to add to it. They just said that it's been it's been halted for now. And the best they could do was guide us to, the Dwayne Reeds or the Best Buys of the world. They did say that if you go to ecyclenyc.com, where they have e-waste collection for entire buildings, that's a program that they just restarted just very recently, but you can only have your service resumed if you are a building that already was registered under this program. For any building going forward that wants to register for this program, I believe they come and they put a bin in your building, and then you put everything in there. I believe that's on hold for now. I'm not sure if buildings can register for it and get into some sort of a queue for that or not. But that was something. So it was a little bit disappointing that, in like all of Manhattan, it seems like there's nothing except for the occasional Dwayne Reed or Best Buy that you can go to for e-waste recycling. They talked about very interestingly, they talked a lot about street sanitation. And one thing that I was very surprised to learn was that last year was like a blockbuster year for the city in terms of street sanitation, litter basket pickups. It was the best year ever. And that's why maybe, the situation on the street seems so dire to us, just visually this year. And somebody asked how much money it would take for the city to restore full service the way it was pre-pandemic, which was litter basket collection 7 days a week throughout the city. And it actually wasn't even a lot of money. It was $7 million only, which is, it is a lot of money, but it's actually very little as compared to the entire budget of the city. So it should be something that can easily be prioritized for restoration once things, once we get more funding or, things calm down a little bit. But everybody was in an agreement that that's it's not a huge expense as far as the city's expenses go. That was, they talked about environmental justice, about how in NYCHA buildings, there's no composting and recycling is there, but it's very spotty and actually very inconvenient. So people have to go from their top floor of the building to the bottom. And so, it came up again at the end about what exactly these agencies need to make their jobs easier. And one thing that came up was just to make the disposal of items by the public easier, whether it's, in order to enable good behavior by people. So, providing more bins and making them as accessible as possible by everyone. And there is a zero waste goal for 2030. I'm not sure if that'll be achieved, but everybody wants to remain hopeful about that. And they also talked about a lot of nonprofit innovators like the Lower East Side Ecology Center, Reclaim Organics, which I believe is within CB7, Fab Scrap, etc., they're coming in and filling the void left by other composting, recycling, city-funded programs. They talked about food donation and how that should be prioritized also in order to prevent food waste. And they also talked about specific bills that are pending. One specific bill, which is Intro 1942, also called the CORE Act, which will mandate drop-off sites all over the city for composting. But the one thing that they need is a mandatory citywide composting directive, which we don't have right now. There's no bill for it in the city at all. So they were advocating for the introduction of such a bill. And that's basically in a nutshell.
So let's ask Natasha whatever questions we have on her report. Let me start out with, I see your hand, but let me start out with a couple. Natasha, first I want to say that when following up on our discussion last month when we talked about the DNS and the impacts of district need statement impacts of COVID, we did include some, general stronger support and remarks about the negative impacts of COVID with regard to the things you're talking about. Some of these things are moving targets where things change every day. Last month, composting recycling had been restored to the Green Market at 97th Street and to a site on 107th Street. A couple weeks ago, it was also restored on Sundays to the Green Market at 80. It's on 77th Street, but the Columbus Avenue Museum Green Market. So some of these things are gradually coming back to some degree. But I wondered whether, and I think at least I learned last month from Peter Arnson that there's a different, focused on the difference between composting and organic recycling, which would include things like bones and paper and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Did the meeting today make any distinction or focus on any distinction between composting and a broader organic recycling?
They talked about the only distinction that they made was between curbside composting and drop-off composting, which is the drop-off is what happens at the green markets, etc. Curbside is, I think, when you get those brown bins within your building, and then at the end of the week or whatever they get collected. The only thing they said was that curbside composting is suspended till I think July of next year. They said to hold on to your brown bins because hopefully it'll come back. But in general, they did not talk about collecting things like bones and stuff. My understanding is that at most places that are city funded, like at the green markets, you can only drop off vegetarian food scraps and then some non-veg like eggshells, etc. But at some of the private, like nonprofit type areas, like the Reclaim Center, they do take non-vegetarian food scraps and oil, household oil. Right. So it really depends. It's kind of a mishmash. You have to do your own research, and but I think at the city-funded sites, it's really just vegetarian. And I don't know about the curbside composting, but it's a moot point because it's suspended till July of next year.
So we've seen some comments on this general topic that Natasha's talking about have shown up in the chat. So Natasha, we might all have a look at those, but particularly Natasha, in case she has any more insights.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to the chat.
Barbara, you've got your hand up. You want to, if you're not unmute already, unmute.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to respond to Natasha. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions, and then I wanted to say something else. First of all, my building has a bin for recycled clothes, and it's run by Housing Works. I don't know if the program is currently up and running, but we certainly have a bin in the basement, and it seems to be mostly empty most of the time. So I know they collect things on a regular basis. So that's another option.
Is it accessible by non-building residents?
No, it is not.
Yeah.
And they will only put it in your building if you have so many units in the building.
Yeah.
The other thing I wondered if in the conference you attended, if anything was said about the big bellies and how helpful they have been as solar recycling, and how they hold 7 times as much as a city trash basket does.
Unfortunately, that did not come up.
Yeah.
So no, it wasn't discussed.
But Barbara, we do have in our budget priorities, Mark, is it on the, I can't remember, it's on the expense side, I think. We have a budget priority request for a whole lot of more Big Belly. We've been aware for ever since the first ones were put in of how effective they can be in reducing waste, in managing the volume of waste.
I think I moved that to capital because you were asking for a lot of them. One Big Belly would be expense, but a bunch of them could qualify as capital.
I think the last we heard, they were around 3,500 each or something like that. And I think our current request is for some in Strauss Park and some in a variety of other places. So we're trying to get them, trying to get more of them rather.
It's even more complicated right now because the newer program is that you they service them or replace them in perpetuity, and you pay a certain amount of money, because what happens is that they do get bashed and smashed up, and then you're in a position of having to replace them again. Yeah. But they are, we put 17 of them in around Theodore Roosevelt Park.
Yes.
Ago and solved a very serious problem there. But if
we have 2 comments on that. And just 1 second, Natasha, in the chat. One, our regular public participant from the community, Ira Gershenhorn, I can see in the chat, is not a fan of Big Bellies, considers them to be effective only for PR, but I think many disagree with that. Oh. And Joyce Bialik in the public is asking what they are. These are these somewhat larger enclosed trash bins that work on solar power, so that the trash goes in and solar power compacts the trash, and they can then collect and fit in these things way more than fit in a normal wire basket. But then it eventually has to be, the compacted contents do have to be taken away.
The newer ones are pedal operated also, so you never have to touch it.
Yeah.
Great.
So that's
I do have a comment about the Big Bellies around Teddy Roosevelt Park. I've noticed for months now, actually, 2 of them, at least 2 of them, are no longer operational. They've been covered by black trash bags and with tape around them. So, and it's been like that for months. One of them is on 77th Street, where the Green Market is, and the other one is on, right by the entrance to the parking garage of the museum. And I was wondering if anybody on the call knows what's going on with that, because they, for several months, it's been like that.
Reported but again, those were purchased just before the start of this program, where Big Belly Company would have been responsible for fixing them right away and replacing them. So I can get back to you on that.
Yeah, that would be great, Barbara.
But may I just say one other thing? And it has to do with last month when I made a little presentation about Theodore Roosevelt Park and the planting that we want to do in conjunction with the noise from the dog run. And I'm not talking about that tonight, but they put in a bioswale. I think it's a bioswale. There is actually a difference, a small difference between a bioswale and a rain garden. One of them purifies the water, and it would make more sense to put in a bioswale in that area because of all the urine from dogs. A rain garden is something that absorbs the water, so that if you have a flood area, it's a wonderful thing to have. But I thought, since this is Parks and Environment, it would be really interesting, and that's not the only thing, but if we had a presentation on the difference between a bioswale and a rain garden, how important these things are, how easy they are to really install. When we installed the one at, on the little streetscape we built between 76 and 77, it was the only one, and I believe still is the only one on the Upper West Side. And it solved a huge problem, which I won't go into now, but I mean, I'm happy to talk about it if you wanted to hear. Anyway, that's all.
Barbara, let me suggest this. I mean, one of the things I was planning to say in this section of the discussion tonight is, and again, two things that sort of overlap. One is that several of the items that we've considered and passed resolutions on that have then been adopted by the full board in the past several months have been brought to us. I mean, not that we didn't know the issues, but have been particularly pushed. We've put on our agendas at the urging, I would say, of various members of the community board or the committees. Susan, for instance, in one case, and last month, although we didn't have a resolution, the Theodore Roosevelt, and a couple of others too, that when we talked about smoking in the parks, and when we talked about and prohibiting smoking in the parks, and also the enforcement of traffic laws in Central Park. So one thing we've been encouraging and pretty successfully recently is both items for our agenda being brought to the attention of the committee by members of the committee and sometimes members of the board. It's not automatic that when a committee member suggests an agenda item, there may be reasons why the chair is in consultation with Mark, may decide it's not an appropriate agenda item at any particular time. But in general, it's a welcome development and it's been pretty successful lately. And then the other sort of overlapping thing is just when there's something out there, not just as I said at the beginning, having some of our members volunteer to be our point persons on specific issues, but kind of the other side of that is when there's a specific issue that may not lead to a resolution or be asking for a policy decision or a recommendation, but simply something that would interest us. We've also been trying to, and I think somewhat successful in getting such issues brought to our attention by members of the committee. So Barbara, I would say on that one, by all means, if you have somebody other than yourself, and you could probably do a good job of it yourself, but somebody to make the kind of presentation that you saw, who's a real expert, let us know. And I don't see why we wouldn't want to have a 15-minute presentation on that issue or many other possible issues.
Offhand, I don't have anybody, but I'll speak to the museum and see if we can supply somebody who might be able to do that, or Bill Castro from Parks, or from maybe even DPR, because they were shocked when we asked for bioswale on our city street. They said I was the first person ever to call them and say they wanted that. So they may be helpful too. I'll try to line something up and let you know.
Yeah, Susan, your hand's up.
I just want to say, I think that's a great idea. We might also want to build on that, Barbara. I found out recently that in Central Park, the rumor has it, I'm not sure this is true, that they do a lot of management of the water spaces in the park. Specifically, the pond was very, very low about a week and a half ago, which gave me an opportunity to get a spectacular picture of a duck eating a fish, which is apparently not an unusual thing. I didn't know this, but the reason the water was so low, as somebody told me, another birder told me, was because they knew that storms were coming over the next few days, and they wanted to get out ahead of it and prevent flooding. So, and they said that this is done throughout Central Park. I assume it's probably done in Riverside Park as well, but certainly in Central Park might be an interesting thing to weave into this kind of like water management and preventing flooding, especially in the pond in the southern part of the park where it's relatively low level. So it would take out a lot of paths and do a lot of damage if it flooded. So it's sort of an interesting thing. It's not particularly something you need a resolution on, but it might be interesting.
Right. Well, our community colleague, Ira, who I referenced a little while ago, now has a long entry in the chat, generally not keen on big bellies for reasons that you can see in the chat. But Ira also mentions that DEP has a spec for installing rain gardens. So this really is an overlap issue, I think, between DEP and Parks Department. He says DEP, Iris says anyway, DEP has 9,000 of them. So Barbara, if you would be willing to undertake putting together, however you do it, some kind, and it doesn't have to be for next month, but some kind of a presentation to us, you might involve DEP and DPR, or at least come up with something. I think we'd be thrilled about rain gardens versus bioswales and even more broadly, water management in our parks. That would be great.
Well, I'd love to involve Susan in this and lowering the levels of the ponds in the park. I think that's fascinating, you know, and so I'm sure somebody from Parks could easily talk to us about that.
Well,
knowledge.
You know, not urgent, but see what you can come up with. I see Lisa Orman, a attendee, is talking about the Gowanus Canal Conservancy has some of them, presumably rain gardens. Oh, we've got 6 attendees. Let's see. Oh yeah. Barbara, just before we finish this part of the discussion, although it really is more an update on committee business, I know from communications we had, and this was really good news, and I see that Daniel Atha is with us tonight. When you and Peter Wright presented the proposal that turned out not to be for a resolution, but it was a discussion last month about planting both a row of plants at the back of the Bull Moose Dog Run and then in the rain garden bioswale area. You had proposed boxwood for the latter area, and Daniel Atha, who's a horticulturist, I believe, with the Botanical Garden, talked about that plant, suggested some alternates, and I think you've made a little progress on that since then, if you want to just mention it. And with thanks to Daniel for his participation on this.
You know, I have to apologize, Daniel. I've tried to send you an email 3 times, and for whatever reason, it will not leave my outbox. But I wanted to thank you, and we decided to go with, presuming this moves forward, because we're looking into some other ideas now that might be more effective, or a combination of a few together. The wax, can't think of what they're called right now, but those evergreen wax berry bushes, whatever they're called, which make a dense hedge and are easy to care for. We are definitely going with those instead of what we had proposed which was boxwood for the front fence. And we're still looking at the arborvitae for the back wall, but I know that the people on 81st Street have been trying to get some kind of soundproofing blankets for a long time. We were told that was out of the question because landmarks and the Art Conservancy would never approve anything like that. But it turns out that that may not be completely true if it's done in the right way, and if the trees are there to screen it and it doesn't harm the brick wall of the garage. So all this is sort of up in the air right now, and we'll get back to you.
Barbara, Daniel has put his email address in the chat. I thought I'd given it to you, perhaps not correctly, but anyway, Daniel's put it in the chat. So thank you. Daniel.
Thank you.
So, you know, I welcome anybody else before we move on to our updates, and this will be a short meeting. Polly, is that a hand up from Polly? I see a hand.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I had put some comments in the chat, and one of the questions I had, I don't know if the committee has discussed this already, is the blue mask. Like, have you seen an increase in masks being discarded in the parks and throughout the neighborhood, since they are required, you know, when you go in the store to go shopping? And then my other question is, how is those masks being handled? You know, because some of those masks may be contaminated by someone who may not know that they have COVID. So that was a question that I wanted to present.
Well, let's turn to Jeff Martin, who's been sitting patiently, who manages Riverside Park on a day-to-day basis, to see whether he can tell us about this. Jeff?
We just throw them out. We often find them on the ground sometimes. They get picked up, they get thrown out with the regular trash. We have no directive or anything that says we need to consider them as medical waste or anything like that. So I don't know how long COVID could possibly stick to a mask or not. I could try to find out, but again, we're not being told that they need to be separated as medical waste. I don't know how hospitals do that either. Do hospitals just throw them out, or they have to put them in a medical waste container?
Jeff, I'm in Rivers, as you know, in Riverside Park very frequently. I don't see a lot of masks on the ground. The far greater problem for me and for many of us who are wearing masks is the fact that most runners, many cyclists, and some pedestrians are not wearing masks. That's more the mask issue than discarded masks to my observation in Riverside Park. But do you see a lot of, I mean, I understand you treat them like regular trash, but do you see a lot of discarded masks on the paths and grass and whatever in the park?
It's relative. I mean, I see more now since we've had this problem back in the spring. But there's not a whole lot of them. I mean, there might be one or two lying around when I go up the bike path every day, from the length of 59th Street to maybe, where I get to 135th Street. I might see 3 or 4 masks along the bike path at any given time, but my staff will pick them up. Mm-hmm. So that's not a whole lot. When I go through the middle landscape areas along Riverside Drive, I might see 1 or 2 here and there. But like I said, it's not a whole lot of masks. They're not like everywhere, like literal or cigarette butts or something like that. But they're here and there.
Holly, I think we do see a lot of them on the streets and sidewalks.
Right, I've seen them on the sidewalks, but I guess my concern is I wanted to know if those masks were separated from the regular trash, because when you talk about, recycling and, certain types of waste matter is separated. So I just wanted to know, not just from the perspective of the Parks Department, but just in general, how that waste matter is being handled, because playgrounds, we have children playing by schools, different park areas, how they throw things and take the mask off their face and just throw it on the ground. I mean, I've seen it. People shopping, once they get out of the store, they throw it on the sidewalk and keep going. So, my concern was, has the health department, given out a directive on how to handle the mask, because you don't know if the person wearing it is contaminated or not and has the virus. And I just think that's a question, that needs to be responded to by the health department. Like, how long does that spore stay on a mask, etc., since we're all required to wear them?
I guess that's a little bit beyond the purview of this committee. But it sounds sounds like it's pretty believable for the whole city, which is you're lucky if somebody picks them up off the street and puts them in the trash.
Yes, exactly.
So in this section where we're really talking about what we do, what we're trying to do, how it's been working in the last year, I have only one other question, and then I would love to hear if anybody else has things they want to talk about before we just do some updates. And my question is really simple. We decided a few months ago, maybe just before COVID hit, to move our meetings, which had been at 7 o'clock for years, this committee, to 6:30. It was a problem for Doug, relatively speaking, which I remember and was concerned about. For the other, everybody else was either indifferent or, as our committee was then constituted, or was in favor of 6:30, and it conforms to, it conforms to all the other committees, doesn't it? Or are there any that are 7?
I think land use may be at 7, although this month they're switching to 6:30.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's HHS. I think HHS is at 7. Am I right about that?
Well,
I think that might be right.
I'm not suggesting that we revisit the 6:30, and I think there's an advantage for members of the public. If all of our meetings are at 6:30, then they know what to expect. And if anything, I'm not sure why Zoom would make a difference, but somehow it seems an even stronger argument with Zoom. But unless we have, and with all respect to Doug, because we certainly don't want to discommode him with his children and dinner, although it is probably 3 meals a day with the family every day now, Doug. So maybe dinner might be a good thing every once in a while. So we'll keep it at 6:30 unless there's a reason to change that. So Paul Fisher, by the way, another board member, joined us a little while ago. I'm just giving a fast look at the chat. There's a lot of stuff about water and rain gardens. Again, Natasha in particular, if you can have a look at that before the chat disappears. Anything else in this sort of general topic area before we talk about updates? Mark, it looks like you want to say something.
I do. I just wanted to follow up on Paul, who put a question in the chat as to why there are so few big bellies north of 96th Street. And the answer, I believe, is that big bellies can only be emptied by a person with a key, because you don't want people putting their hands into a trash compactor unless the thing is turned off, which the key does. As a result, effectively, in order to have a big belly, you need a partner who's going to hold the key master of the big belly, and to make sure that that person is available when it's time to collect the trash from it. So parks is a good use of it, because the parks employees can be the key masters. I believe actually that Shake Shack has the key for the one near them. But other than that, big bellies are and bids, of course, can do it as well. But other than that, it is a bit of an issue trying to make sure that the thing can be collected. And I think Barbara has a comment.
For the most part, they're privately funded, except for when they are in parks and parks purchases them. They are privately purchased and they are expensive. So that may be one reason why there aren't so many above 96, because nobody has stepped up to do that. I'm not sure. Also, if you have any kind of cleaning service, like, Peter, in the bid, like we had on Columbus Avenue, the Doe Fund had the key, and they can watch them and they can tell when they're about to be full, because the light changes on their computer from green to yellow to red. So they can be monitored. And around Theodore Roosevelt Park, they gave a key to Shake Shack as an additional key. DPR also has a key, but they were slow in getting to them. So they gave a key to Shake Shack, since most of the trash, they blame it on Shake Shack anyway. So.
Thanks, Barbara. I don't think I mentioned in the beginning that Susan is taking the minutes tonight. Susan, is there anything you need to have clarified or anything for the minutes? Okay. Ken.
I don't know whether I had some questions for Jeff, but maybe it's part of updates. I don't know.
Doesn't matter. It's all kind of part of the same big thing tonight, or the same thing. Do you want to just ask Jeff your questions?
Okay. These all, 4 of them relate to the updates on the Greenway bike path.
And can you speak up a bit?
Sorry. Yeah. How's that? Is that all right?
Is that better, Susan?
That better? Okay. The narrowing, the construction that's requiring the narrowing of the bike path between 59th and 61st is very, very short. Do we have any idea how much longer that's going to be going on?
Yes, it should be going on until about November 1st. So the construction should be, it was from October 1st to about November 1st. So that's our projected completion date.
I think Jeff, Ken is talking about a different area. We're not, the stuff at 59th Street and that detour that put the pedestrians and the cyclists kind of back together, that's been way before October 1st. The very bottom of Riverside South.
Right.
The dates you mentioned are the 72nd Street area.
Okay, that's, the 72nd Street area is what you wanted to know about?
No, we were asking about 59 to 60.
Oh, the 59th Street, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, so what we're waiting for with 59th Street is just to go through a punch list. And what I need to get done, or what needs to get done is along the waterfront, there is a lot of riprap, and we need to get construction, the contractor, to put more fill next to there because there's no railing or guardrail that's on the side there. They completely, it's very nice. They put a complete new wall, like sort of like a seawall right next to the riprap. But there's no guardrail or anything, and it's not designed for it. So we would like them to put more fill inside there so that people can't step and then, fall into basically a 4-foot hole surrounded by rocks and get their legs caught and stuff like that. So, it's one of the things on the punch list. That's the main thing that I noticed is problematic. So we're getting the contractor to do some punch list items. I don't think it's going to take too much longer to get that open, but everything did get complicated by the COVID thing. It should have been open a while back, but it's like I said, everything on parks has been on hold since the spring on the COVID, and now things since the contractors could start working a few months ago. Yeah, they're starting to get these jobs done, but it is taking a lot longer than we wanted. But that's just the nature of the beast right now, and I'm sorry about that. They're working on it. It should get done pretty soon, I think.
Have you had any incidents of collisions between cyclists or cyclists and pedestrians there?
I know it seems odd. I have not heard anything about collisions there. I think one of the things that may be preventing it is the fact that people kind of realize they have to slow down and they have to go single file through there. And, for this, I haven't heard anything at that spot right at that point. So
okay.
I think also you've got sanitation, not on my part, but right there, they in the mornings and during rush hour, the sanitation trucks go in and out. And so they have flag people there. And I think, honestly, that's kind of helping slow people down a little bit. They see the flag people there. They slow down a bit and then they go on the path. And, they're for some reason, I just haven't had any problems myself. And I haven't seen or heard anything at that location to indicate that there's any kind of collisions or anything going on there. I haven't encountered anything.
Good.
Ken,
Okay.
Ken, you're playing this a little subtly. Today, Ken sent an email, and I was copied, but I don't know that Jeff was, to Margaret Bracken about a problem with a protruding sign down there that may have been moved, or maybe may have moved itself, that seemed to create a danger. So Ken, maybe tomorrow you can just kind of get Jeff in on that conversation as well.
Yeah, sorry, I should have copied you and I forgot.
And meanwhile, we have from Jeff, who was just speaking, our Riverside Park manager, in response to Paul Fisher's concern. Jeff has put in the chat, Riverside Park has quite a few big bellies north of 96th Street, Paul. I can monitor them with a computer, says Jeff. So we are not totally bereft of them north of 96th. It's just we, in general, have fewer, I think. So Ken, did you have other things you wanted?
Yeah, I'm just sort of moving north. The new detour as a result of the 72nd Street construction.
I'm sorry, Ken, can you speak up a bit? It's really, you're sort of fading again.
Sorry. Are other people having that problem also?
Less so.
Okay. The construction necessitating the detour at 72nd Street, the signage for the detour for cyclists who are going south, where there's the fork in the road, and cyclists who are not exiting at 72nd Street should go right. That got better, but it's certainly not ideal. I know you're betting on people getting used to it, but a lot of people are tourists, or they take that route very infrequently. So I would encourage you to try to get even more prominent and larger lettering on the signage, so it's really clear what the decision point is, and maybe just even a Greenway North sign to the right, because that's essentially, unless you're going to 72nd Street, which very few people are. Can you hear that, Susan?
Susan, did you hear that?
Okay.
Is that a yes from Susan?
Right.
Yeah. Jeff, aside from, and I mean, I agree with Ken that the signage is much better than it was when it first went up, but it's still not great. But aside from the signage, I was pleased, I think, a few minutes ago to hear you say, I think, that you expect that whole detour to disappear or no longer be necessary on November 1st. Is that right?
Right. I can't guarantee the date, but that's the projected date.
It's
So
still the projected date.
we'll see what happens. But I don't think it'll last much longer than that. But like I said, who knows? I mean, sometimes, they're digging. So anytime you have a dig job, things can go wrong, as you know. So, but when I saw them marking around the ball fields, everything was really marked nicely. So I'm really hoping that this is going to be a good dig job. We won't encounter any problems, and that they'll get the job done on time. So I was really impressed with the marking that the contractor did all over there. I never saw anybody mark it so well. So I'm really happy. We'll see what happens. And they look like they're chugging along.
Great.
So we'll see. But they're doing even more work around the old basketball courts and the handball courts down there. So that's I think they're going to continue to work on that for quite some time. But the one around the ball field, the softball field, we're hoping that'll be done pretty soon.
Great. And then just moving even further north, any update on Cherry Walk, the success in getting subcontractors?
I have no updates. I talked to Ben and Don about that today. We're disappointed that didn't happen when it happened. I just don't have anything else. I checked. There's nothing new developing on that right now. So that's unfortunately I have nothing to report about that.
And I talked last Thursday, I think it was, with Steve Simon, who's the chief of staff of the Parks Department in Manhattan, and is kind of the center of all action in Manhattan on the Parks Department, about that same question, Ken, where they had told us, in good faith, I'm sure, that detour that was going to take cyclists off of the Greenway and inland for a period of unclear how long, a couple of months, was going to start several weeks ago. And they started putting up the signs for the detour, and then it didn't happen. I inquired and learned from Steve Simon, as Ken mentioned here, that it's the contractor somehow didn't line up subcontractors and didn't start the job when they thought. So the detour signs apparently are not there to confuse anybody any longer. They were just there just a short time with the anticipated detour. But when I asked Steve on Thursday, hey, what's with the subcontractors? When does anybody know when that project is going to start? Steve's answer was no, they don't know the answer. It is just a few blocks. I mean, it's sort of crazy because of the way the Cherry Walk is configured, because you can only get on it at 100th and off it at 125th. And the whole Cherry Walk is going to be detoured, even though the work is just for a few blocks. And this is work being paid for by FEMA on damage to the riprap that is attributed to Superstorm Sandy. But anyway, Ken, the short answer from Steve Simon last week to the same question that Jeff doesn't know the answer to was nobody knows the answer. You got more?
I had something on Central Park, but maybe I'll save that for the updates.
Okay. Anybody else? Doug Kleiman.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad Jeff's here. Thank you. And if you've answered this stuff before, I apologize. And so this is about Riverside Park. A few items that I'll just sort of rattle off real quickly. On a lot of the park benches, I've seen that there appears to be algae or mold or whatever on many of the benches, particularly in the area of, let's say, 73rd to 77th Street. And a lot of the wood seems to be splintered. And I'm just wondering if there was a plan, and why did they get that way? It seems like whatever, there was some flaw in perhaps in the design. So that was one question. Other question is I've noticed some really wonderful, happy people enjoying the park, but I saw a couple of things that were concerning to me. Some large group gatherings that I don't know if there is a policy for social distancing, but I saw a group of about 22 people together, closely convened, all drinking alcohol, by the way. And they unloaded all of their bottles of wine and beer in the garbage pails right at 74th Street in Riverside. And at the same time, another group had these large knobby tired e-bikes that were just going back and forth in the green area, which I think is not good for grass and was ripping up, it could rip up the grass. And lastly, I noticed, and then this may extend beyond your purview, but still some of the entrances to the park do not have curb cuts, particularly, I believe it's on the south side of 74th, where there's a curb cut that needs to be repaired for handicap ADA accessibility. And that's it.
Well, I think, Doug, the last thing, you're probably right, is the curb cut's probably outside of Jeff's purview. But Jeff, what can you tell about algae, large groups, I mean, e-bikes or any powered bike, whether it's on grass or on paved paths, shared or not, are illegal right now, but they are rampant in the park, and not just bikes, it's scooters and stuff. But Jeff, can you say anything
on the lawn? Just not even on the.
You're talking about the lawn, yeah, lawns.
Okay, so the first one with the benches at 73rd to 77th, you're seeing green stuff on it. It's probably some kind of maybe like a natural algae or fungus or something. But I've made a note of it. You can power wash it. Should come right off. I've seen it when they hit it with the power washer for a little while. It just comes off pretty easily. So we can power wash those. So I made a note that we can get to those and see how they look.
They're splintered too. It seems like there's a lack of a coating or something. That I don't know if there's a general plan for. Some of the benches are new and are very smooth. They seem to be coated, and others are raw and now are splintering. So,
are they concrete benches, by the way? Do they have the concrete bases, or they got the metal frame?
Metal frame.
Metal.
Okay.
Down at the river or higher up?
Higher up.
Aren't they all World's Fair benches with concrete base there?
They're iron, because when I've sanitized them from when my parents are sitting there, it's wrought iron.
Okay. If they've got splintered slats, if you got any pictures, if you ever want to send me a picture, definitely send me a picture. I replace any splintered slats. I'd love to know from anybody if I have any benches with splintered slats. We'll definitely remove what it's called a laceration hazard or a pinch hazard. So definitely want to get those out of there. Benches are notorious for having them, and it's like trees. Like I try to check trees and benches, and I'll never see all there is to them when it comes to like little stuff like that. So if you see anything, definitely send it to me, and we'll try to take care of it as quickly as we can. So we don't want people getting injured on the benches. That's always a big problem throughout the city when that happens, and we never like it to happen. The group at 74th Street, I'll let Pep know. What day was that, by the way? Do you know? Do you have it? Was it on the weekend or was it?
It was on a weekend. It was actually this past Saturday, but over the last preceding 3 or 4 weeks, the question really was, obviously alcohol is not allowed in the
right.
But is there a policy or is there a law, whether with the city, that there's I don't know if these people have been 22 people, which I counted, are all family members and have been living in the same
right.
place, so they're all safe, or they're not. But I just couldn't help observing it, and it looked a little scary to me.
What again, reach out to me. PD doesn't like to enforce this hard, and neither does park enforcement. So the best thing for them to do is to approach the group and hand out masks. PD, often groups know the rules, and so they'll say we're all family members. They may not look nothing alike, but that's what they will say, and they know that's those are the magic words to say if you want to get away with this. So, but mainly we want people to be safe. So if we hand out masks, and then of course if they see alcohol, they can issue a oath summons for alcohol or ask people to remove it or both. But we definitely don't want to see alcohol in the parks to a lot of extent. Everything. So those are the best. But you can reach out to me over large groups, and I'll send someone right away as quickly as possible.
Jeff, I would just interject personally that I think that having our city workers paid to stand there, some of them not wearing masks themselves, but handing out masks is, in my view as a taxpayer, a waste of my money. Because if people are down there without masks, it's not because they don't know they're supposed to wear masks, and it's not because they can't get a mask. But Susan.
Yeah, Doug, I know what you're talking about. On Saturday night, we were walking across the park, and in Central Park, at the Turtle Pond, just north of Turtle Pond, below the Great Lawn, was a rave of like 100 young people who could not possibly have been related. More than 100 perhaps, and they were dancing around, no one wearing masks, alcohol everywhere, and plumes of pot smoke. So it's not hard to see that there's a lack of control. And I know that the PEP officers are in short supply. It's hard to imagine. If I were a PEP officer, I would not have wanted to take on that crowd.
That seems like a 911 call to me.
Yeah.
But to your other point about the e-bike on the grass, just this evening during a walk between 5 and 6 p.m. in Central Park, our regular route down to the pond and back, passed, I think, 5 people smoking pot, and then saw 3 or 4 bikes on the grass, and then counted, I think, 15 bicyclists on the paths. So not all of them e-bikes. So what can you do?
You know, as a question, are bikes allowed? And I should know this really, but are bikes allowed in the area of Riverside Park on the walk where on the pathway where people are walking? That this is right off of Riverside Drive. I mean,
You mean at the upper level of the park?
The upper level, right?
Yes. The answer is yes, Jeff.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there are certain areas down at the river, the famous Rosenthal bypass, if you've not been with us on that in the last year or so, Doug, but
Yeah, the
for
green
the
one.
most part, paths are shared paths.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And just again, Doug, I mean, we put up signs recently: no motorized bikes or scooters. Periodically through the park along the bike path, and then inside in certain areas where bikes maybe come into, where we think they would come into along the promenades. So it's hard to enforce though, but the first part of enforcement is putting up notifications like signs. And so, you know, a motorized vehicle is a motorized vehicle, whether it's gas powered or electric. But there is some gray area as for assisted pedal bikes. And so they go pretty fast too, but they're not as heavy as a large e-scooter or one of those large, I don't know how to describe it, unicycle things that people have. Those are very heavy. And then I've even seen people go through now with basically like the Revel type scooters, like large motor scooters that are electric. They're very heavy. Whenever I see people stop with these things and they're in an area, I ask them, please don't operate that in the park. But that's about all we can do. We can't chase them down. You know, we can't put up roadblocks or anything like that. And it's a tough issue to try and solve. We just have to keep asking people not to do it. And then PEP officers have given some oath summonses when they find these in there. Now, if you see someone with a Revel scooter, in the park, if you get the license plate number and report it to Revel, at least they say they're going to block that person from renting their scooters for some period of time or something like that. There's a penalty associated with that.
Yeah, just for
So, you know, the thing is and this happens to me and my husband all the time, we're down there doing an exercise walk and sometimes on a, you know, fairly narrow path, like on the river walk and wherever we are. And one of these things goes, and there's some pretty bizarre motorized vehicles too. Jeff mentioned the unicycle type. I mean, there's a lot of different bizarre motorized vehicles. I mean, they go by so fast that there's no point in calling 911, even if you thought that otherwise there might be for something like these large gatherings where there might be time for the police to get down there. When one of these motorized things whizzes by you and nearly kills you, you know, what's the point of even calling 911? With Revel, though, and I wasn't really going to go into any big discussion about this, but Jeff mentioned it. Once they started operating again, they called it relaunch about maybe 3 weeks ago. One of their drivers driving the wrong way down 6th Avenue, which is an uptown avenue, nearly killed my husband, who was biking up 6th Avenue. I won't tell you any more details. So I personally submitted a very extensive complaint to Revel, and the community outreach person or whatever she's called me the next day, and we had a very big chat about how Revel supposedly operates. And as Jeff's, and we have seen, and I know Mark has said he's seen Revel scooters, motor scooters in Riverside Park, and my husband and I have seen them as well. What Revel says is that their GPS software, what's the word, not blinks, pings every 7 seconds. And if somebody is driving in a park or wrong way on a street, they automatically know that. And they claim that even without regard to somebody making a complaint, with preferably if you do with the, and of course you can't get, if somebody's going past you 1,000,000 miles an hour, you're not going to get there. You're not going to have time to take a photo or get their license number. But they claim that even if nobody makes a complaint, they automatically record this violation, and of that type, that is riding in a park or wrong way on a one-way street, they automatically permanently suspend their membership. I take that with a huge grain of salt. We had talked, and Elizabeth is no longer on the meeting now. Elizabeth and I had been talking off and on with our transportation committee chairs about having a joint meeting about Revel now that it's relaunched. That hasn't happened yet. I think we still would like to do that. Anything else before we segue into what's really not all that much of a segue, which is other updates?
Sorry, I just want to say I have also noticed a lot of bad behavior by cyclists and motorized vehicle riders in Central Park, and there maybe four times a week. And I don't think I've seen anybody on grass, but I've definitely seen a lot more people recently on pathways going every which way on city bikes or their own vehicles, and it's really out of control. And so I just wanted to echo Susan on that. And also I would say that I would really advocate for more signage in all our parks, specifically about trash, saying that this is a carry in, carry out area. I don't know if officially it has to be, but I think it would be really helpful it might go some way in preventing people from dumping a lot of their picnic trash into the limited trash bins that the parks have, all parks around the city.
Jeff, Richard and I were in Riverside Park this morning, and did I dream this? Somehow I'm under the impression that somewhere I was today, and I was only there, had some new signs on carry your trash out. Do you have those in Riverside now? Did you put something?
I'll check.
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't. Maybe it was a dream. I don't know.
When it comes to signage, there's seems to be like there's different philosophies of signage. It's hard to get the right amount of signage. A lot of people feel like the more signage you have, the better. But sometimes other people point to a city street where you're trying to drive and you have, maybe a dozen signs on a pole. No parking here, no left turn here, no whatever. And it's hard for people to get a sense of all this information all at once. And so suddenly you have people making left-hand turns where, they'll look up and say, I didn't notice the sign, and it's clearly there, but it's got a bunch of other signs right there. So there's sort of a philosophy that maybe too much signage is detrimental sometimes to getting the message
Not only that, but as we've talked about when we talked about enforcement of traffic laws in Riverside Park, the next month we talked about and had a resolution on enforcement of dog related rules in Central Park. We've talked about a number of other similar issues tonight. It's always, you may have, regardless of the number of signs you have and whatever else, there's always 90 or 95% or 85% or whatever of people who will obey the law and do the right thing. But there's some percentage that no matter what you do are going to do the wrong thing. And the bad actors are really the ones we're talking about. Doug identified some with these big gatherings in the park. It's the people on the crazy motorized vehicles. It's lots of other examples, some that we've talked about tonight. And it's like, as I said, what's the point of trying to hand out masks to people who are in the park and know perfectly well they should be wearing masks and may or may not have one in their pocket. But anyway, but thank you for all your input on this, Jeff, which is very, very, very helpful. So moving on, oh wait, I just saw something. Oh yeah, Barbara Adler says she's seen revels recently around 72nd in Riverside Park. Not surprising, although Ira said he hasn't seen many recently on the Cherry Walk, but yes, bizarre vehicles, but not revels. So when you got one of these crazy fast moving motorized things, it's pure chance that you happen to be there when it's going whizzing by, and we all have different experiences that vary from day to day, I guess. So some more updates and then we're out of here. I've got one anyway that is real, and then a couple of them that are, who knows. Phase 5 of Riverside South, which is the area from about 64th Street to 68th Street-ish. Long history going back to 1992, but it's been under construction by New York City for complicated reasons, make it different from the other phases of the park of Riverside South. We were told about a month ago that it was going to open on September 30th. I happened to be down there that morning. There was no sign of its opening. And so I think I checked with either Jeff and his colleague, Ben Kramer, or Steve Simon, or both. Anyway, the short answer to that is, after all these years and all of these months of it's about to open, a single, what's my cell phone? I declined it. A single electric meter had yet to be installed and approved by Con Ed before the park could be open, because the lights couldn't be employed until that was done. So that was 3 weeks ago. And when I spoke to Steve Simon on our budget priorities last Thursday, I said again, hey, Steve, what's with phase 5? He told me, and I'll take this with a grain of salt as well, but he told me that that meter, even as we spoke, or the next day, which was last Friday, was going in and Con Ed was going to have a look at it. And they expected to open phase 5 after 28 years this week. Jeff, what's your version of that?
Pretty much the same. In fact, we're preparing to get it open on Thursday, if we can. So that's sort of like our target date right now, is to open it up on Thursday. We're having our maintenance guy put up signs. So we're picking up signs tomorrow. He's going to get wooden posts and put them up. But I'm hoping for Thursday. So if you know, it's really exciting and everything. I'm very excited to have this open to the public, just like everybody else is. We will see. Like I said, just keep your fingers crossed. Like I said, I can never guarantee that these things are going to happen when they're going to happen. But I know that what Steve was talking is exactly right. There were two issues. One was the water, and the other one was the electricity. And so I'm hoping, short answer, I'm hoping that we can have this open on Thursday.
Steve said there's not going to be much of a ceremony or even a virtual ceremony. But what we should all remember, and I think we talked about this before, is there's some really wonderful features in Phase 5. There's a new playground. Maybe the single most important thing is there's a dedicated bike ramp going down from 68th Street that makes a big curve down from Riverside Boulevard to the river. So it's a fantastic new dedicated cycling access point to the Greenway. And there's some other features in this section of the park as well. What there isn't, however, is the from the beginning mandated comfort station, which was designed but not ever bid. So that's why that's on our budget priority list that we'll talk about tomorrow. Other updates, I'll do a couple of sort of depressing ones, or at least non-ones. Have been unable to get any more specific information about the Rotunda project that we all know about, or about the Marina project, other than what Steve Simon said to me in a communication last week, is that there has been a halt, if I think I'm getting this right, on any bidding on capital projects, even if they have the money, even if they have the plans. And I don't know if this makes any sense, but anyway, my understanding was they're not letting them go out to bid. And so I don't think we can assume that no matter how far advanced, short of a contract, any capital project was, I don't think we can assume that it's necessarily going ahead, at any time we can identify, or to the degree of detail and amount of work and nature of the project that we looked at a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and whatever. Mark, do you have anything you want to tell us about the 3 resolutions we passed? I think it was 3. Yeah, it was, and we sent letters on all of these. Mark appropriately notified our electeds. One was rules of the road enforcement in Central Park. One was dog enforcement in Central Park. And the third was, it's a different category, but the third was trying to expand the no smoking laws in the parks to cover the whole parks. On the latter one, I think Mark and I between us know a little bit, and it's not encouraging, but Mark, do you know any more than I know?
Probably not. In reverse order, the smoking in the parks verge, there is a bill being carried by Peter Koo, who's the chair of, is it the Parks Committee?
City Council Parks Committee.
Parks Committee, and it's broader than the bill that you were asking for, because ours was, or our board was asking for, because ours was specific to parks, and he was trying to ban smoking in a broader swath of public spaces than just parks. And so we wrote specifically to him to try to urge him to nudge our bill forward, or treat our bill separately as a more doable request. And they wrote back essentially to say, hey, why don't you join us and advocate for our bill? And that's kind of where we are. I haven't heard from any other electeds. The only person who responded to either of the enforcement resolutions over the summer was Captain Gallagher, who is the commanding officer of the Central Park Precinct, who invited me to go talk to him. And we were going to talk about having a meeting with other folks. That has never come together because Captain Gallagher is the only person that's actually responded to the letter or the resolution. So I guess we can have another conversation with Captain Gallagher, or maybe we can invite Captain Gallagher to a future one of your meetings. In between or around the time that happened, the Parks Enforcement Patrol budget was slashed to within an inch of its life. So whether that impacts the ability to have enforcement on these things.
I don't think it changed in Central Park for 2021. I think the Central Park dedicated stayed the
Because they
same.
pick up the slack, yeah. Anyway, that's all I know. Listen, I'm gonna have to run in about 10 or 15 minutes, so if we could wrap this.
We'll be done by then.
Very good.
Just one thing on the smoking thing we were asking for, and the board asked for, which is that Mark Levine council member Levine seemed enthusiastic about it and did the first step towards getting a bill drafted, but the council people don't draft them themselves. They have some kind of a staff group that does that. And what they came up against was whoever made these, seemed to be making these decisions, was your no smoking in parks bill is subsumed in this much, much greater a broader piece of legislation from Council Member Koo. And the problem with that is Koo's thing has been introduced and around there for years, but it hasn't gone anywhere. It's not going to go anywhere because it's much broader and he doesn't have support. But Levine was not able to get around thus far as we know, but there may be some more news tomorrow, possibly, because never mind, but if there is, I'll let you know. Couldn't get them to write it, couldn't get the people that write the bill to write it to get it introduced. So there is no Levine bill for what we're asking for because of the stumbling block that some powers that be think it's encompassed in Peter Koo's bill as a smaller subset of that, and that one is going nowhere. Anybody else got any kind of updates? Because Doug needs to go and Mark needs to go and Ken does. Ken, you're on.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, because I switched microphones. Maybe that's a little better. Good. Back in February, the board passed a resolution calling for the city to look at creating more cross-park routes for cyclists and better signage for the existing routes and the creation of a task force between the Parks Department, the Conservancy, DOT, and the Central Park Precinct to look at the issue and report back. I think in our resolution we said no later than April. Then something happened in March. I'm not really sure what that was, but
like a pandemic?
Yeah, maybe that might have been it. But still, we've been asking at our transportation committee meetings off and on of our DOT liaison, Colleen, for updates, and there have not been any updates, and it's been pretty clear that there has been no task force meeting, and nobody's talked about it, and then at the last meeting, sort of very surprisingly and saddeningly, Colleen even said she didn't recall agreeing to being part of a task force. I went back to our meeting, which was a joint meeting in January of the Parks Department,
Transportation.
DOT, and on a couple of occasions she said a task force was a really great idea, and,
right.
And it's in our resolution where we say that the DOT pledged to create a task force. So it's almost a year since Dr. Kammerman was killed using the 96th Street transfers, and nothing has happened. So I'm raising that because I think it's really, if there's any way we can, as a committee, exert some pressure.
Ken, I know nothing different and I'm equally discouraged on that point, but I think there's a broader point here. I mean, the negative way to look at it is we knock ourselves out and we have these meetings and we have very thoughtful discussions and we hear our community and we carefully craft resolutions and we send them to the right people and we do everything right and nothing happens. And we've talked about 4 different resolutions that have come out of our committee in the last year, that one being just before the pandemic and the other 3 much more recently, where we do everything right and then nothing happens. And so that's pretty depressing. But I think the other side of it, going back to how we started tonight, is one of the things that I really hope we will all do going forward more than we have done so far. And there may be nowhere to go. but is to really collectively try to think of and how we can advocate more effectively when our board passes a resolution or takes a position that's come out of our committee to make it happen. Mark's doing the right thing. We're all doing the right thing, but it all goes nowhere. And I'm kind of hoping going forward that we can turn more of our resolutions that seek changes in one way or another in somebody's behavior in New York City into some kind of noticeable effectuation, I guess is the right word. On that depressing note, we know Doug has to go, Mark has to go. Mark was probably up all night dealing with the document I sent him on the DNS, but it was tough.
Among others, yeah.
Among others. Anybody else, anything tonight? Otherwise, we will convene in, now wait a minute, Thanksgiving, we're not in the way of Thanksgiving, are we? Not that anybody's doing Thanksgiving this year either, I'm not, but can't. But
Okay.
we're the third Monday, 6:30, so that should not be a problem, I think.
That's the 16th. You're a week and a half away from Thanksgiving.
All right. As I started out saying, everybody, please come virtually to the virtual steering committee meeting tomorrow night, and please advocate for high rankings for all of our committees' many projects.
We're going to see the list soon.
Beats me.
I emailed it earlier tonight.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you.
All right.